welcome back to another edition of Inside Badger Hoops. As always, we are your co-hosts, Ira Bowman, Justice Rockhill, and it was a good weekend, wasn't it?
Yep, no doubt. Very entertaining.
Snow College right now still remains on the men's side #1 in the country, although this week in the rankings they received 15 out of the 16 first place votes. So that's one more that Snow College gained in the first place voting rankings. We'll take a look at some of the NJCAA top 25 real quick before we get into what happened over the weekend, because some of these rankings are important to what's going on with Snow College's resume, being at 19-1 overall after 2 wins this past week. So CSI came in to Ephraim on Saturday ranked 16th after Snow beat them, that we'll get into later. They fall down to 24th, and Salt Lake Community College fell to 24th, and CSI fell to 22nd. So last week, Salt Lake was 22nd, and they fall 2 spots. CSI fell 6 spots from 16 to 22. And on the women's side, we'll take a quick look at that when we start talking about the women's games after we've recapped the men's games from this past week. So just to get right into it, Snow College now, men's team, 19-1 overall, 5-0 in conference. It's been the most outstanding season for the #1 ranked team and Coach May's team.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, when you look at this 19-1 record on paper, you know, it's clearly showing that they're a dominant team. But I look at the 5-0 conference record, and that tells me that they are really legit. Because we saw them last year when it came to the conference play. They really struggled. I can't remember the conference record from last year. I just know that it were all close games, but really tragic losses to the Badgers. So I think this year they've really locked in and have really lived up to their #1 ranking.
And that really shows up with the experienced players that Coach May has on his team. So that one loss, 19-1, came to Midland College back in Texas in late November, I believe, or early December. Yes.
Somewhere around there.
I can look. Midland would have been, late November, November 21st. Midland was not ranked at that time. The team that Snow did play ranked that week was Odessa. Snow won that game. We talked about that on our first episode. Midland, the loss to Midland, now Midland's up to 12 in the country, so that looks a little bit better on our resume, being that Snow's only loss was to a top 12 team in the country. However, some of our Snow College's wins that were ranked now aren't. Eastern Arizona is no longer ranked, and Odessa is no longer ranked. Odessa is still receiving votes, so in that top 30-ish range. Eastern Arizona is not receiving votes. Harcum is still receiving votes, but not ranked, and that's kind of where they've been for most of the season, is around that receiving votes range. So then we take a look at the games this weekend, JC.
Yeah.
The final buzzer after these 2 games was, North Idaho game got a little bit scary towards the end. Badgers pulled it out.
Yeah.
What did you see in that game that you really love? Badgers win 88-81 after it got down to about 5 late.
Yeah, well, out the gate, I saw that the Badgers came out with a lot of fury. They came out shooting very effectively, and to North Idaho's credit, they were hanging with them for a while, and obviously towards the end, cutting it down to just a 7-point win for the Badgers. But, a 15-point lead twice in the game for the Badgers, so that tells me that they're very effective on offense when they are locked in and really keen on focused on being efficient as possible and really not letting their foot off the gas.
Yep. Badgers shot 40% from the field, 31% from 3, and 92% from the free throw line against North Idaho in their conference home opener. Now, we talked about it last week after going on the road against Salt Lake, Utah State Eastern, and Colorado Northwestern. In the first half of all 3 of those games, Snow College came out a little bit sluggish in the first half, and man, you kind of touched on it a second ago. That was the complete opposite in this game and in the next game.
Exactly that. The home court advantage, it's a real thing. We all know that at this point. That's where majority of the Badgers' practice is.
It's all in the same gym that they play their games in.
Yep, all in the same court, so they're very familiar with everything. They know the type of shots that are going to, go in. Obviously, they practice as much as they have. They're used to those rims and everything because, I do believe every rim on every court is a little bit different, so the Badgers were much more comfortable in that scenario against North Idaho, and the results show.
Yep. Badgers were able to close out this game against the #1 scorer in the country, who got outscored by Isaac Finlinson. Von Weems for North Idaho finished with 27 or 28, I believe, and Isaac Finlinson, who you could argue is the best player in this conference, or Isaac Garrett, probably one of the two, and then he finished with 30 in this game. Second time he's dropped 30 this season.
Yeah.
It was the first game of the year and then the first conference game of the year, so that's kind of funny how that lines up. But I think the star in this game, the performance in this one and the next one, as we'll get to, was Coleman Ford's 17 points off the bench. And he played phenomenally well, and you talk about a guy that's not the biggest, but plays with the biggest heart.
Oh, no doubt, and the effort he gives is exponential. And he takes a lot of hits out there because, as you mentioned, he's not the biggest guy, but you know, heart is the biggest thing that coaches look for, and that's exactly what Coach May found in Coleman Ford. Gives tons of effort, takes a lot of hits out there. He's a very tough guy, and he's definitely a key to this team.
And he was the key against Southern Idaho, you could argue. I mean, it was the final score against Southern Idaho on Saturday was 110-82. Yep. Badgers get a win against another ranked team in College of Southern Idaho, Golden Eagles, and it was all Badgers from the jump. It was a tie game with about 14 minutes left in the first half at 10. Then the Badgers go on a 14-1 run and end the half up 20, 53-33, and it was more of the same in the second half. I mean, the Badgers were on cruise control in the second half.
Oh, most definitely. And the Badgers, as you just mentioned, they were in rhythm. It's like nothing they did was wrong. Almost defensively and offensively, they were efficient everywhere. On defense, you saw their communication was very keen. They knew the top threats that CSI was going to bring. I think we talked about it. Doyle. Yeah, Doyle. He was the top threat.
16 points going into this game, finished with 9.
Yeah, exactly. So that tells me that the Badgers are really committed to keying in on the top threats, neutralizing them first, and really just trying to make the secondary players, bench players, and the other starters clean up the mess, basically.
Coleman Ford set a career high. We talked about, I said 17 points against North Idaho. He had 25, so back-to-back games where he sets a career high. 25 points against CSI. He shot, went 9 for 11 from the field, 5 for 6 from 3, 2 for 2 from the free throw line, finished with 3 rebounds and 3 assists and only 1 turnover against CSI in a game where he was getting beat up everywhere. Even though it was a large lead, I mean, Coleman Ford was by far the most outstanding player on the court in both of those 2 games. I mean, Finlinson had 30, and I don't want to diminish that, but I think Coleman Ford really stepped up into the spotlight, and that's why he's this week's king of the court.
Yeah, no doubt. As you mentioned, credit to Finlinson, 30 points, that's obviously a huge accomplishment. But yeah, no doubt, this is an easy choice. Again, I think Coleman Ford is most deserving of it, not just because of his play on the court, but also his mentality as well, and the way he is just a huge spark coming out the bench for the Badgers. He's a great teammate. I'm sure all of his teammates love him, from Lemke down to Mark Brown Jr., his partner in crime at the point guard position. So Coleman Ford, I think he's really excelled in his role, and I think he's definitely going to get at least 1 or 2 conference starts going ahead.
I could see that happening. Coleman Ford, 25 points. He played phenomenally well, and I mean, it was just not even just shooting-wise, because I mean, his 5 of 6 threes was part of a team 15 of 30 from 3 in that CSI game, which was huge. But, I mean, watching him play in that CSI game was unlike anything we've seen from him his whole career, all of last year, all up to this season. And that's not to say he's been bad, because he's been an energetic, reliable guard, but he just played out of this world in the last 2 games this weekend. And that's definitely something Coach May can be looking forward to going forward in the rest of conference play.
Yeah, most definitely, because we talk about it with the women's team. They have that triple point guard threat with Pennington, Elliott, and Richens, and it's just been really great to watch Coleman Ford and Mark Brown Jr. just be that dynamic duo at the point guard position. Just not just their play individually, but also their mentality and their basketball IQs. Like Mark Brown Jr., he has been phenomenal this year, and now he has dual, like a partner in crime, as I mentioned, with Coleman Ford. So no doubt, I think it's going to be a deadly point guard duo going ahead, and especially if they begin starting together, because you never know what Andrew May is going to pull out of his pocket. Maybe he's going to go with that 2 point guard threat, like I just mentioned, maybe even a 2 center threat. But regardless, I'm really excited for what the rest of this conference season is going to look like for the Badgers.
I can agree with you there. I don't know that Coach May might start both of them at the same time, because that takes away a lot of length.
Yeah.
Doesn't take away any shooting, but it does take away some defensive length in the starting lineup. So I don't know that Coach May would do that. But there have been times where he's played both Ford and Mark Brown Jr. at the same time.
Yeah.
He did that a few times in both the North Idaho and the CSI game. Coleman Ford played 25 minutes against North Idaho and 29 minutes against CSI. And it was just a great weekend for the men's team.
Yeah.
It was a phenomenal game to watch. I was honestly a lot more nervous as a spectator and somebody who is a media that covers Snow College basketball, a little bit more nervous going into the CSI game because Coach May had not beat CSI at home his whole coaching career here at Snow until last Saturday.
Yeah, and that obviously gives a lot of credit to him. He's really adjusted, really analyzed the other coaching staff for CSI, who do have a great coaching staffs.
Yep.
College of Southern Idaho, but I think Andrew May has really keened on being the best team in this conference and the best team in the nation.
I think you're absolutely correct on that. Now, so Coach May got his first win against CSI first win at home against CSI this past Saturday. Coach Zoo on the women's side got her first win against CSI in her first game against CSI as a Snow College Badger coach. Since then, though, it's been a struggle for the women's team, and they're now on a 13-game losing streak to CSI, but before that, on Thursday, they gave up 40 points. The Snow College women's basketball team gave up 40 points to Galindo in a game that was close for the first half, and I thought the Badgers had a shot to win it going into halftime, even though they were down, but it was just a little bit too much when you give up 22 points in the first half and 18 in the second half to a single player.
Yeah, and I was commentating that game, so I had a front row seat to that game. Galindo, she just played just lights out from the beginning on both
points,
ends.
16 of 20 from the field, and 4 of 5 from 3.
Yep, and 21 points a half, if I remember right. I believe it was. Yeah, in the first half, she had 21 of those points alone. And so I think the Badgers going into this week, going against Utah State Eastern, which we'll get into, here pretty soon.
Yep.
I think they're really going to have to keen in once again on stopping the players that torched them last time in Price. If you remember, it was Scriver that was really the best player for Utah State Eastern. So I think
23 points in that game.
And she was really just utilizing her length advantage against the Badgers. So I think for Snow College and Coach Zoo, it's going to be really difficult to keen in on that. But I have a lot of confidence in this team in trying to neutralize any threat that they can.
And they did a much better job of that against CSI. There was no one player that truly went off for CSI in that game, and I think the Badgers could have been able to come out with the win. The final score 67-51 against CSI. And I don't think I mentioned final score for the North Idaho game, 71-57. Badgers take their first conference home loss in their conference home opener, and then 67-51 following that up on Saturday. So they're on a little bit of a rough stretch, but we saw a lot of positive things in that Southern Idaho game outside of turnovers, and I think those turnovers have been turnovers in that one quarter where they score single-digit points have been the killer for this Snow College women's basketball team. And if they can clean up both of those just a little bit, I think they really have a chance to go on a run here and win some games, because after having 25 turnovers in the first 3 quarters of play against CSI, 20 turnovers in the first half, 25 at the end of 3 quarters, Snow College was still only down 1 after they outscored CSI 21-13 in the 3rd quarter of that game.
Yeah, and that tells me that they're really good at adjusting and getting back on defense very well and getting into their set and realizing what the offense is looking like. So I think defense is definitely their strong points thus far in conference play. I just think that, like you said, they just got to clean up the pieces and make all the pieces click on offense, and this team will be just as deadly as we saw before conference play.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think their defense has been played very, very well outside of the North Idaho game at home and Galindo, because they only gave up 61 to the loss at Utah State Eastern.
Yep.
And then they only gave up 67, which is a winnable. Like, you give up 67 in this conference, that's a score that you know that you can win with.
Yep.
But your offense has to play well, and it's these turnovers and single-digit scoring quarters that have really shot the women's team in the foot, because it's that 4th quarter in this CSI game where after they score 21 in the 3rd, Badgers only score 6 in the fourth quarter, and it was a rough fourth quarter to watch because of it.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's really just going to come down to finishing the game, being strong in the clutch moments, and really just looking to pull away with the win by any means necessary, and do not let your opponent get the edge over you both mentally and physically.
Yeah. There was some bright spots individually in both of these games. Sydney Smith might have not had the most outstanding statistical game against North Idaho, but I think her presence and the way that she stepped up in these games when Ayana Bay was out. Ayana Bay's back now, and it was clear that they missed her defensively, and she made a big defensive presence, especially in the Southern Idaho game. But when she was out, Sydney Smith really started to come into her own and has played very well alongside Ayana Bay and off the bench for Coach Zhu's team. And that's why she's this week's Queen of the Court.
Yep, and this is where I'm going to brag a little bit over you, partner, because last episode I called it.
You did?
I called it.
You did.
Sydney Smith, you are the Queen of the Court. Congratulations. You played stellar on the home court. I'm expecting big things from you this Thursday. But yes, congratulations. I mean, against CSI, she was really the brightest spark for the Badgers. 10 points, 8 rebounds, almost a double-double, and 3 assists from a post player. That's very impressive.
Yep, that 10 points, some people may look at that and it's not the most. It was the most a Badger scored against CSI. So that 10 points, 8 rebounds. She played very well, got to the free throw line quite often in both games, and has become a much better free throw shooter as of the last few games. And I mean, she's just been playing really well, and you said it. We're excited to see what Sydney Smith can do coming up against Utah State Eastern, where we know that Coach Zhu's team is going to be out for a little bit of blood, trying to defend home court. Speaking of which, this Thursday, January 23rd, is when Utah State Eastern Eagles come to town. Sydney Smith, Brooke Pennington, and Malia Elliott all looking, on the whole team really, but those 3 players really looking for revenge after not so great games offensively last time out at Price.
Yeah, definitely. And defensively, it just looked like a struggle as well. I watched the game live. Like defensively, yeah, they had their moments, but as you mentioned, just struggles on offense really just were the ultimate pain against the Badgers, no doubt. And I think vengeance is definitely in their mind, especially on the home court, where they know that the Eagles have played a lot of games in the past. Ellie Esplin and Scriver, they've both individually played a lot of games at the Horn Activity Center. So I think the experience against them on that court is really going to help an advantage for the Badgers, you know, knowing how good they can play and how quickly they can adjust to that court and the home crowd as well. So I think the Badgers are really going to try and neutralize them overall and really just make the rest of the bench players for Utah State Eastern, like I mentioned earlier, just clean up the pieces.
You mentioned the crowd. I didn't mention this earlier, but the crowds that Snow College had for both the men's and women's game this past week were some of the best I've seen in my 2 seasons here covering Snow College basketball. I mean, the North Idaho game on last Thursday, I think was the most packed I've ever seen it for both the men's and women's games. So Snow College students, you need to keep coming out, and everybody else in town, keep coming out, because it's really fueling this team when we play at home and have a crowd like that.
Yep, so that's our challenge to you. All right, you got to get your butts in those bleachers and cheer on for those Badgers.
They're both playing well. I mean, the women, not in the win column, they're not, but on the floor, they're playing well defensively, and there might be some keys that they can do to win this game. And in your mind, what are those keys?
Well, the first key, I think, is definitely limit the turnovers, protect the ball on offense, really be secure with it, and don't throw wayward passes. I've seen a lot of those struggles in the past few games, just the wayward passes getting away, miscommunications on offense, leading to out of bounds and giving the ball back to their opponents. So I definitely think limit the turnovers. I think they had 16 in their last game against Utah State Eastern.
I believe you're correct.
Right. Yeah, it was 16. I think the goal for the Badgers right here, keep it under 12, and getting rhythm on offense is definitely going to be a key for them in this one. So yeah, limit the turnovers, keep it under 12. Another one I think is going to be scoring in the paint. That's going to be a big one. They struggled with that one in Price, and I think
they struggled with it against North Idaho and CSI as well.
Yep, no doubt. So I think scoring in the paint for this game is going to be critical. And I have another prediction for Queen of the Court. I think it's going to be Ayana Bay. Her presence, both offensively and defensively, is going to be keen in this game. I'm expecting her to really lock down Scriber in the paint and really accelerate her progress on offense. She did struggle a little bit on offense, I think, a little bit compared to what we've seen in the past.
Yep. You know, after you come off from an injury, you have at least 1 or 2 games where you've got to get back into the rhythm of playing. And I think Ayana Bay has those 2 games under her belt, and then just 1 game this week on Thursday. I think she could really come into playing a much better game and really be established in the offense for Coach Zoo.
Yeah, no doubt. And Brooke Pennington, she's definitely going to be looking for her in the paint. So I think Ayana Bay needs to be established first and foremost in terms of the starters. But bench-wise, I think the bench players really need to get back in the rhythm. Hadley Richens, she's really struggled the past few games against CSI. She did have her moments. I believe she had 7 points, I believe it was.
Yep.
Yeah, but she did also have her struggles against her former team and North Idaho as well. So I think on the home courts, taking on Utah State Eastern, she's definitely going to be looking for vengeance.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Those three keys, those are what us as guys that analyze the team really think that that's what needs to happen in order for a Badger victory and to end this conference losing streak, because Utah State Eastern comes in with a much better conference record, 2-3, Badgers 1-4. So I guess that's only a 1-game difference, whereas they've played already, and now Snow can make that a little bit more of an even record, where both Utah State Eastern and Snow are 2-4 with a win and even out those conference standings. And speaking of those conference standings, I want to go over those just a second here for the women's team while we're looking at it. So College of Southern Idaho, after the win here, 5-0 in conference, Salt Lake 4-1, and North Idaho 3-2, and then it's Utah State Eastern 2-3, Snow 1-4, and then Colorado Northwestern 0-5. So Snow can get this win. They'll even out for that 4 spot with Utah State Eastern after this week, which is just the first step in getting up into the conference tournament. Now, for the men this week, same team. Utah State Eastern comes to town. Utah State Eastern lost at home to Snow at the buzzer. Ike Palmer, I believe, was the one that missed the buzzer beater, and I can guarantee that Utah State Eastern is going to be coming in here with a little bit of fire, trying to get a road win here on the floor of the #1 team in the country.
Yeah, most definitely. The Eagles, as you mentioned, it was really just a last breath effort, and it was a bit of a mini comeback. I can't remember precisely what they were up by, but I just remember that the Eagles really just had to make a run.
Utah State Eastern was up by 9. With about 10-ish minutes left, and then Coach Zoo switched to a 2-3 zone. That flipped the momentum of the game. Snow College got a 5-point lead at halftime in that game. So that also brings something up here at home. Will Coach May go with more of a 2-3 zone look? Will he throw a 2-3? Will it be man? That type of a thing, because the 2-3 zone was what threw off Utah State Eastern last time they played in Price, which is funny because that's all Utah State Eastern runs is zone.
Yeah, exactly. So for the Badgers defense, I think you're definitely going to be alternating like at least 1 or every 2 drives.
Giving them different looks.
Exactly. Giving them different looks, really make them struggle against defense in general. Maybe even see a 3-2 zone. I can expect another press defense from the Badgers as well in this game. So I think the Badgers are really going to have to be disciplined going into this one, especially in terms of finishing the game and coming out fast like they have in the last 2 conference games.
Utah State Eastern comes in 11-6 overall. They're unranked. They are 2-3 in conference play. They're on a 1-game win streak. They've won 2 games on the road. They've lost 2 games on the road. And they lost to CSI by 20 this past week and beat North Idaho by 7. So Snow College beat North Idaho by 7, but they lost to CSI by 20 last Thursday. So those are some common in-conference common opponent results there, where Snow College goes 2-0, Utah State Eastern goes 1-1. Now they meet up for the 3rd game and to start the 2nd round of conference play, right? There's 5 teams. Snow will play each team 3 times. Already played all 5 teams, gone 5-0 in conference so far. So this game against Utah State Eastern is going to be the first one of the 2nd round of playing all 5 of those teams. And in those 5, that first round of conference play, Snow College, I mentioned, 5-0 in conference. College of Southern Idaho is sitting there right below at 4-1. Salt Lake 3-2. Utah State Eastern 2-3. North Idaho 1-4, and Colorado Northwestern 0-5. So that's what the conference standings look like so far. Snow College well in the lead after getting their 12th win at home versus CSI. And I mean, there's going to be some keys to this game, JC. Why don't you go ahead and roll those off for us?
Yep, definitely. First key, I think, out the gate is shooting better from the field. I think the Badgers really struggled in price shooting from the field, both from 15, 20, and of course the three-point line. I think they really struggled out the gate with that and really throughout the whole game. So shooting better from the field, especially on your home court, is going to be really critical for them.
And
they've shot very well.
They've shot very well
Yep.
these past few games. So that's something that we'll be really curious to see if they can continue to shoot well on the home floor. I completely agree with you.
Yep, definitely, and I can definitely see them shooting better from the field, so I think it's going to be a high-flying offense, really getting off those quick shots and really picking their shots very well on the home court. The second key for this game is limiting the USU Eastern Stars. Palmer, as we mentioned before, he averages 16.5 points. Hubert, he averages 13.8, and Hayden averages 12.4. So that is 3 players that average double-digit points per game. So I think the Badger defense, as I mentioned earlier, they're going to have to be really disciplined in whatever set they come out in. So they really have to neutralize those stars, and it's really just going to come down to who can make a stop on defense and who can be more productive on offense.
Yep.
Yep. And Hubert and Hayden, by the way, they did combine for 42 points in the last matchup.
Huber had 25, Hayden had 17. Hayden, most of those points came in the second half and was a really big jolt to Utah State Eastern almost coming back and winning that game. Why don't you tell us the last key for us, JC?
The last key, I think, has definitely come out strong in the first 10 minutes. As we mentioned earlier, they were down 9 very early in that first half. So the Badgers, they, again, have been doing that in the last 2 games. They've come out very strong. They've come out fast. They've come out energetic. So definitely keep doing what they've been doing the past 2 games, and you will come out with a victory in this one.
I couldn't agree more. So that will do it. Everybody make sure, come out, watch these games this week. Thursday at 5 p.m., that's January 23rd, the women play Utah State Eastern, following right that up at 7 p.m. The men play Utah State Eastern. We had great crowds last Thursday. Less so Saturday because it was a holiday and there was a lot of people that left town.
So understandable.
But this Thursday, I mean, there's no holiday this week. It's a middle of the week game. Everybody come out, watch these teams because they're a lot of fun to watch. So thank you very much for watching. From Ira Bowman and JC, our producer and cameraman, thank you so much for watching Inside Badger Hoops. Have a good evening, night, whatever it is.